So that's pretty cool. Now, when we're talking about Super Smash Bros., the players sometimes get flung off the screen, right? If somebody has a really high damage percentage and they get hit, sometimes they'll go flying off the screen and the camera doesn't follow them. It just shows a little indicator up at the top of the screen showing them they're way too high up for the camera to follow. Same thing with off to the right or left or even down. So we need to build something so that this camera can take that into account. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll get out an object and I'm just going to paint this a different color so we don't lose track of what's what. And I'll put a chip on here. So this is going to be our focus area, right? Our stage. So I'll get out a tag here and I'll call this stage area. And this is what our camera is going to prefer to be looking near. Right? So if a thing gets too far away from the stage area, we don't necessarily want the camera to follow it anymore. So we could use something like a trigger zone to build this staging area. I'm going to be using some variables for this, and you'll see in a little bit why. So these are going to be the bounds of the staging area. More specifically, these are going to be like half bounds. So if this cube here is 2 meters wide, then the x bounds would be 1. So it's really like a half bound. So I'm going to go ahead and label all these. Now the reason I'm using half bounds is because this block is 2 meters wide, but there is a center point, right? And the tag is the actual center point that we care about here. So let me go ahead and move this to where the tag is. But this way, when we're taking a distance check between the edge of the bounds and the center point, we don't have to do extra calculations by dividing by 2. This is just already there for us. So I'll use 8 and then 4 and then the z half bound. I don't know that it really matters for this because if it's a 2D thing, then we may not even need to worry about a z half bound, but I'll just do it just for funsies. So I'll get a combiner out and I will plug these in like so. And now when we're plugging numbers into this, it actually is taking like a smaller amount, 10%. You can see that. So if we multiply the whole thing by 10, now we can plug that in on the overwrite and we get 844, which is exactly what we want. I realize I made a mistake here. These are half bounds, so we actually want to multiply this by 20, not 10, because now it's actually a half bound, so from here to the edge would be 8 instead of 16. I'm going to go ahead and lower these real quick. So what is this trigger zone going to do? It's going to be looking for that tag, which we actually never named, so we should probably name it now. I'm going to go ahead and label this player. We can use this tag to determine what information we're actually sending out to the camera. Remember, as of right now, it's getting the absolute position of all of these objects, regardless of whether or not it's in the playing area. So what we can do is let's get a selector out, and this tag output will go into the active port. This means that when it's not in the playing area, A will be the port that's active, and when it is, B will be the port that's active. So now that we have the selector out, what I'm going to do is I'll get a node out, and this is going to have no port. I'm going to pass the position into the node and send that through to the receiver or the transmitter. I'm also going to get a chip out, which we'll get into how it works in a second. This is going to take in the position and send that as well. So when we're being detected, meaning the player is in the zone, we want to power this node. When we're not, we want to power this microchip and send whatever data this is sending. And just to make this easy for us to test and see how this works, I'm actually going to send both of these into this node and I'll send this there. This way I can get out my location displayer chip, which if you haven't seen this, you can plug in values, either a transform or a position fat wire, and it'll automatically display. So if I start time, we can see where this block is. It's at negative 1.5, 0.25, and 0 in the XYZ direction. And we can see if we turn the movement back on, when it gets out of that zone, it will send something else. Currently it's sending 0 because nothing is actually in that chip. So what I want to do inside of this chip is, instead of sending the actual position, I want to take the position clamped by these values set up in the trigger zone. So for example, let's say this player is over here. It's outside of the trigger zone. So instead of sending the position, I want to send the position that it would be if it were inside, meaning this is like 500. So instead of sending 500, I want to send the absolute max it could be from within these bounds, and pretend that that's where it's at, so that it would actually end up sending 400. We don't ever really want the camera's view to go too far past this stage area, right? We want it to kind of stay within these bounds. It can maybe move pretty close to the edge like this, but we don't want it to go all the way over here if a player is out here. So if we fake where the position's player is by saying that they're at the edges of the zone, it will back out so that it has the whole zone in view. But if a player goes off screen, then that's just because that's how the game works. Hopefully that makes sense, and if it doesn't, I hope it makes sense very soon, because I'm going to be explaining exactly how we can get this done. So I'll take the position of the stage area, which would be the center point of it, and I'll pass it into this microchip. And I will also take the bounds, the half bounds of the X, Y, and Z, and pass those in as well. So what I want to do is I want to take the center point of the stage area and add all the half bounds, and also subtract all the half bounds from those points, and send those values on so that the players can use them to clamp their positions. So if I take the stage point and subtract these bounds, then I have this point -4 in the X direction, -2 in the Y direction, and -2 in the Z direction. So that would be like kind of this back corner over here. Similarly, I'd like to add them together as well. And that would give us this point +4 in the X direction, +2 in the Y direction, and +2 in the Z direction. So what that does is it gives us these two positions that we can use. And what I'm going to do is I'll get out 3 4-number combiners. So this is the minimum and this is the maximum of the bounds. So we'll plug A into this, and the A from the positive into B and D. And so what this is going to do is it's going to go in a wireless transmitter. And so what these are our X stage bounds. So if you're confused about what this is, let's take a look real quick. So we can see here that we get -4 and 4 for ABCD, because it's really just this point +4 -4. So how can we use this X stage bounds? Let's grab a splitter. This is our position of our player here. And now we'll grab a wireless receiver, which will listen for the X stage bounds. Now, if we get a signal manipulator out, we can pass this in the custom remapper. We can pass this here as our remap thresholds. We can see we get -4 to 4. And if we change this to clamp values, then when the value comes in, if it's ever greater than 4, it will just send 4 out. If it's ever less than -4, it will send -4 out. So just to prove this, I'll get a number displayer out. And remember, we're looking at player 1 here. So if we start time, we can see that it's at -1.5, and once we pass -4, it sends, well, you can see it on the left side, it's getting a -4. Right? That's what we want to send for our X value once we pass once we get to or pass -4. So all we do is do the same thing for the y and z coordinates here. We just pass these values in so that they can be used by the players to determine what to send to the camera. So that's this chip completed. I've labeled this dispatch stage bounds. And so now we can use the rest of this logic for our player here. We're just going to do the same thing here for the y and the z coordinates. And then all of this will go into a 3-number combiner, which will then send out. So right here is the position of the object, the way the camera sees it. And once we get outside of any sort of bounds, it stops sending higher numbers, right? So we can see here it's at -4, 3.75, and if I pass z, then it stops at 1, right? So we can see that it's bounded by that trigger zone's area. And just to make things super clear, I'm going to get a keyframe out, and I will use this keyframe to change the color of our cubes to red, for example. And this will signify that we are outside of the bounds, meaning A is the active port. So now we can see as that box leaves the bounding zones, the camera stops paying attention to it and kind of ignores its position for the most part. And that keeps the other boxes that are still in play in focus, because if that one goes too far outside of the zone, then the camera shouldn't be following it. So if I take this same mover and put it into the second player, but instead I have this one go upwards, now we can see that the same thing is true, right? When it leaves the screen, the camera doesn't necessarily take its real position into account, and that leaves all the players that are still within the stage area to be focused on more heavily than the things that are outside of the play zone. So one thing that's really neat about this whole stage area is you can have stages that evolve over time. Like in Super Smash Brothers, sometimes extra pieces will come into the stage, and so we'll want to be able to include those areas in with the stage and maybe move things over. So I'll go ahead and move it, and the way I'll do this is if this is finished and this other timer is not finished, then we'll go ahead and move this. After about 5 seconds, the whole stage area will move to the right, and the camera will prefer anything that's over to the right in that area, right? And if the players don't keep up, then they're going to be off camera, right? So we can see the players move in and they're on camera, but if they fall off the stage or whatever, then that's that's their problem, and the camera will ignore them. So I think that's a pretty neat idea for like an evolving stage. Of course, you can have all kinds of neat things with this. You could also, if you wanted to, you could have the bounds change as other things join in the stage, right? If you wanted this area to still be applicable, but then add extra stuff on top, you could do that. And of course, we can see this in real time as well. We'll look from the back direction here. So we can see that as we move this thing over, the camera prefers this general area, anything that's in this area. If this staging area moves over here to the left, well, the camera's left, then we can see that the camera kind of prefers anything closer to this than anything that was in a playable area before. If this was confusing or I went too fast over that little topic, please let me know in a comment below. I'd like to know whether or not I'm explaining the things I'm trying to explain in a decent fashion or not, and if not, I'd like to improve. So let me know if this is too fast or too confusing.